Just again, feel free to unmute yourself, ask questions, or post questions in the chat. And as always, follow us on YouTube. So we have more than 1,000 viewers on YouTube. All of the seminars are recorded and posted over there. With this, Jan, that's your show. Take it away. Tell us about how to predict option returns.
Thanks, Dimitri. I want to thank the organizer of virtual derivatives again to include our paper in this seminar series. And also it's very exciting to meet all the audience online for any questions and comments. We are very looking for any feedback and advice about our paper. So our paper studies how to use textual information to forecast equity option returns. This paper is co-authored with my previous colleagues, Jay, now he's at PolyU, and Bing Han from University of Toronto, and Ray Jin is my PhD student at CHK, and Shinto now is at Fudan University. So in this paper, we'll mainly focus on equity option return prediction. So text data gets lots of attention in finance, especially because of the interest in machine learning. So digital text information such as newspaper, social media, and regulators' filings has become fruitful resources for asset pricing and corporate finance topics. So some earlier seminar papers can be traced back to as early as, for example, Tatlock 2007, Laura McDonald 2011, although most of the previous textual analysis focus on forecasting stock returns or fundamentals, firm fundamentals, including some recent studies, for example, by Kelly, Xu, Molina, and others. But there are a few studies to focus other assets, focus on other assets return predictions like derivatives, bonds, or commodities. So our papers tries to fill this gap to understand whether and how text data can forecast the equity option returns. Textual information matters for asset pricing because it provides either new information on firms' fundamentals or affect investors' opinions on financial market and therefore their trading activities. So along these lines, our paper asks this following three questions. Does news media affect the equity option tradings? If so, what type of information is the main drive of option return predictability? Is it related to risk or mispricing? And lastly, our paper also try to explore how should the digital information be extracted and be interpreted. So let me first make a quick summary about our paper's finding. This paper is mainly about the empirical study. So we do have several very interesting findings for your information. So first, we find information extracted from news media has strong predictive power for average equity option returns. In these papers, we mainly investigated two popular approaches to analyze text data. One is a lexicon-based approach. The other is based on the machine learning algorithms. We find the machine learning approach achieves much more robust and stronger performance than lexicon-based approach, for example, using some predefined dictionaries. Second, we examine where this option return predictability comes from. Empirically, we find the predictive power captured by our machine learning methods comes from we call it combined effect of multiple sources of option return prediction. And the main contribution of this predictive powers come from its relation with the future implied volatility change, followed by idiosyncratic volatility, implied skewness, and implied kurtosis. So overall, we argue that the option return predictability by our machine learning approach comes from mainly the volatility-related information. So our paper is closely related to three areas in asset pricing. First, we provide new empirical evidence that the text data provides actual information to understand the financial market. So our papers also belongs to this fast-growing literature of machine learning application to asset pricing. So compared with other variables, text data is an ideal setting to apply the machine learning due to its high dimensional properties and the nonlinear dependencies. And lastly, we also examine how to provide a more efficient way to interpret the textual information from the model. The last point we think it's actually very interesting, but it's quite challenging to explain the predictive power of the text data. especially based on the textual information itself. So in these papers, we propose a potential solution on it. I will discuss in details later in my presentation. So let me first describe the methodologies we used in our paper. We applied mainly two methodologies to analyze the text data. The most classic approach is a lexicon-based approach. For example, Laura McDonald, 2011. So the lexicon-based approach essentially is a dictionary-based approach that we first define a certain dictionary, including all relevant words. Then we count how many specified words appeared in the text, and use it to measure the intensity or relevance of the document to our problem. So there are two commonly used dictionaries in finance. One is the General Inquiry Dictionary by Tetlog 2007, and the Laura McDonald Dictionary. So in our paper, we choose Laura McDonald Dictionary as an example, as it is more close to finance-related topics. For the lexicon-based approach, we start our analysis by defining two measures based on the Laura McDonald Dictionary. The first one is the sentiment level, which is the number of positive words minus negative words scaled by the total sentiment words in the article. And then we take the average value across all the related articles for a certain firm to obtain our general opinions for such a firm every month. So a higher sentiment just indicates a more positive view from news media about the firm. Oh, sorry. Second, because options are also sensitive to higher moment information, so we also consider another measure based on the lexicon-based approach, which is this uncertainty measure. It is the same logic based on the Laura McDonald Dictionary, which contains a group of words proxy for uncertainty. So we calculate this LM LM uncertainty for each article as the total number of uncertainty related to the words specified in the Laura McDonald Dictionary. They actually have also a small dictionary for the uncertainty measure. And then we divide it by the total words in each article. And then again, we average across all the articles for each firm within each month. Lastly, as an alternative choice, we can also consider using a ready-to-use sentiment variable from the commercial data vendor Ravenpack. This is also commonly used in the asset pricing literature. We use it as a control variable in our study. So a lexicon-based approach is straightforward, but it has many limitations because the dictionary is pre-specified, so it may lose some useful information in the news media. Moreover, is that unlike Starks and firm fundamentals, the underlying drivers of delta hedged option returns, such as variance risk premiums, skewness, and kurtosis, they are much more difficult to describe using words or be specified by a predefined dictionary. And instead, the machine learning approach in these scenarios will be well suited to deal with those limitations. So the basic idea applied here is that we use the past option returns, let's say YT, and all the text data features xt minus 1 to feed a model, a function, let's say f of xt minus 1. And then we apply the model out of example by using the text features xt to obtain a fitted value of equity option returns at time t, namely this y hat t plus 1, condition on time t. And we treat this fitted value as a textual predictor, PP, extracted from news media to forecast the equity option returns. So this is a typical framework in asset pricing to extract the return prediction signals from different resources, no matter from structured data or unstructured data. We choose the machine learning method simple vector regression as our main empirical result. So SVR. SVR has been used in financial literature, for example, a very seminal paper by Molina and Barrera 2017 to construct a news-based VIX through the high-dimensional textual information. So similarly, they also use the news media, newspaper data, but in that papers, they focus on the index option, but not the option return, but it's only the VIX. And we choose SVR for our main empirical result because it is more interpretable. We use a linear kernel, so it's a linear model. And also SVR is demonstrated to work more effective and efficient when the number of features is much higher than the number of data observations. So for a quick explanations, you can simply think SVR as a linear regression model, but only consider the model residuals out of a certain linear boundary. So in our papers, we didn't apply any those kernel transformations through the SVR, because the SVRs, you have those different kernels to kind of like a synthetic generate some features so that you can have a high dimensional space to create a hyperplane so that you can get a better classification performance. Okay, but for interpreted purpose, in our case, in our studies we only consider a linear case. So we do not consider those nonlinear models. And also follow our previous setup, the signals from news medium from the SVR, we define as TP. It's just essentially the fitted value from this linear model. But definitely as a robustness checks, we also tried elastic net, random forest, and neural networks in our paper. And all the alternative methods also shows robustness of the predicted power by news medium. For input features, in addition to using word frequencies like lexicon-based approach, we adjust the count numbers by the process of this TF-IDF, namely the term frequency inverse document frequency, which is commonly used method to deal with the asymmetric distribution of words in the linguistic analysis. So a quick explanation of this adjustment is that it punishes words that appears more often across different documents, while put higher weights for words with fewer frequencies across documents. It is mainly to mathematically is mainly to deal with the parallel distribution of the word frequencies in the NLP analysis. But no matter how adjustment we did, the features, especially in our main empirical result, the features we used here is still at the word level. So each word is a different feature. Unlike the lexicon-based approach, in the machine learning approach, we input all the features, namely all the words in the document to the model, and we use the SVR to obtain the coefficient estimated for alpha and beta. And then we gave the model a new document and constructed a fitted value based on the estimated coefficient. And the algorithms will automatically decide which words are more important and which words are with negative or positive effect. Okay, so after constructing the textual signals, the rest of the empirical test will be standard in asset pricing. We will conduct both a portfolio sorting and Fama-Macbeth regression to evaluate the performance of our predictors. If the text information really contains some useful signals about the equity option returns, then we should see a significant portfolio sorting result, or the Fama-Macbeth regression, we will see the significant coefficient. So before we go to the details of the empirical result, so let me quickly introduce the data we used. Oh, I see a question here. This question. Question one: how do you deal with negations? Yeah, for sentiment, when we construct the sentiment variables using the Laura-McDonald dictionaries, we consider the issues of negations. For example, if it's not good, then we will treat it as a positive sentiment instead of a negative sentiment. And second is that, do you use cross validation? Yes, yeah. I will specify how we train the models later during the presentation. Okay, so let me quickly introduce the data. So the newspaper is collected from two resources, ProQuest and Factiva. ProQuest actually covers more articles and journals. So our data covers the main news distributors, including Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Washington Post, and the Financial Times. We use the full text, not abstract, the full text in our analysis. There's one issue that for both ProQuest and Factiva, they don't provide the firm tags for articles. So we need to use some fuzzy matching algorithms to assign each article to its corresponding firms. So here is an example of the newspaper we web scraped from the ProQuest. And note that an article may be assigned to multiple firms because it may cover the multiple companies. So in the algorithms, we assign each article to a certain firm if a firm's name appeared at least twice in the document. For the lexicon-based approach, we use the Laura McDonald dictionaries to compute the sentiment. So the dictionaries has already specified those relevant words as positive or negative sentiment or uncertainties. So for positive and negative sentiment, they have around 4,000 words. And for uncertainties, they have relatively few words, around 250 words. And for the other data resources, it's standard in the SI pricing. For example, equity option data from option metrics, stock data from CRSP, and also the sentiment data from the revenue pack. Okay. And because for the revenue pack, the sentiment data it is a commercial package, so they do not disclose the details how the sentiment is constructed. In summary, we have this following predictors. For lexicon-based approach, we have sentiment level, uncertainty, and the sentiment measure from revenue pack, which is this CSS, the composite sentiment score. For machine learning approach, we have textual predictors fitted by SVR to forecast either call or put option returns. So we have a separate model for call options and put options. When fitting models, we will use 18 months rolling windows months sample period with 12 months for training the model and 6 months for the validation test. It's like the cross validate. Okay, because we need to choose the hyperparameters in the SVR. The hyperparameters in SVR is mainly two. One is the width of the margins, and the other one is the tolerance for those soft margins. Okay, and then we will keep this model fixed for 6 months, and the model will be used to forecast the next 6 months option returns. We can definitely increase the frequencies to train the model. For example, every month we can train the model, and the result is also robust and similar if we change the frequency of the model training. Okay. So in other words, we will update our models for every 6 months. The main dependent variable is equity option returns. So to eliminate exposure to the underlying stars, we look at delta hedged option returns constructed by selling a call or buying a put options, and we're gonna hold delta shares of the underlying stocks and rebalanced at daily frequency. So well, C and S denotes the call option price and the underlying stock price. And delta is the Black-Scholes call option delta for firm I. The numerators represents the total dollar gain at the end of the holding period. The reason why we choose the selling call and the buying put is to make sure that the denominators are always positive. The test follow the traditional portfolio sorting approach. At the end of each month, we sort firms by those textual predictors, either lexicon-based or machine learning predictors into quintiles. So within each quintile, we compute the average delta hedged option returns over the next month. The difference of the portfolio returns between the top and the bottom will reflect the predicted pattern by a certain textual predictor. Our first finding is that the lexicon-based variables, LM sentiment, LM uncertainties, and the CSS from revenue pack, all of them fail to forecast the future equity option returns, at least in our example. So no matter whether it is about sentiment or the higher moment, even using the commercial sentiment measures. Okay, for the revenue pack result, it might not be too surprising because we think the data vendors mainly serve for those stock investment. So for their sentiment measures, they may be more focused on the stock returns instead of option returns. But things are different if we apply the machine learning approaches. The portfolio sorting result have a much stronger and more significant patterns. Yeah. Oh, I see a question here. Is any intuition why put returns are so more negative than call options on average? Let me check. You mean the sorting patterns, right?
No, I just mean the average. The average put returns are minus 40 bips. The average call returns are minus 5 bips. And both of those are straddles, right? So I'm wondering what's the difference. So not the 5 minus 1, but the average across 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
All right. Yeah. I'm not sure why we have this difference between the, yeah, why the delta put option actually has more negative returns than the call. But this sample actually is relatively small because when we do the filters, there's a lot of we have to in the examples the options must have news coverage. So in the subsamples, but at least what we know is that in these subsamples, most of the options belongs to the large cap stocks. Okay, so maybe let's first look at the machine learning approach. So things will be different if we apply the machine learning approach. So the portfolio sorting results become pretty strong and significant patterns, and it also survives after controlling for those different option risk factors. We also run a formal McBeth regression. So the coefficient in the table are time series average of the coefficients for independent variables from cross-sectional regressions each month. So our analysis show that either sentiment level or uncertainty measures losses the predictive power in the presence of existing option predictors in the literature. But the main variable SVR here, they are still very robust. And the textual predictors extracted by SVR have both a positive and a significant return prediction for both delta hash core and delta hash put. Okay. There may be potential concerns that how much our empirical results depend on the particular choice as SVR, right? If you change another machine learning method, the result will not be very robust. So to verify this, we also extract the textual information using other alternative machine learning method, for example, elastic net, which is a combination of the lasso and the ridge, random forest, and also neural networks. Okay. So this table just to provide a consistent evidence that textual information from news media obtained from those alternative machine learning approach also have a consistent predictive power for accurate option returns. I think I saw another questions. So can you show which words in the ML approach are particularly important for prediction? Yeah, I will definitely show that later. That is belong to our last sections, but we're trying to kind of explain what our model captures from the machine learning approach. And each gets a coefficient. Yeah, that is exactly what we do for the last section. Yeah. Okay, so this table just to provide us consistent evidence that textual information from news media obtained from various machine learning approach can also have this return predictive power. So for neural network here, we mainly use a shallow neural network, which means that the number of hidden layers is less than 10. It is worth noting that the textual information extracted by or among those machine learning approaches is largely overlapped to each other. For example, if we run horse race regressions, so first is that if we run univariate regressions, so Feynman-Macbeth regression for each of them, they are all significant. But if we run a horse race regressions, including all the textual predictors by those machine learning approaches, there will be a strong multicollinearity issues among them. So all the coefficients will not be significant. Although SVR performs relatively better than others. Okay. So that is indicates that those textual information extracted by different machine learning approach, they actually capture the similar information set. We do not observe that using some more advanced nonlinear models, for example, random forest or neural networks provide better performance. So SVR and elastic net, these two linear methods have already provide good enough performance to the return prediction by news media. We also conduct the robustness checks using different text features, because previously our main result is mainly based on this unigraph. It's just the single words as the features in the model. So we also extended our the word features to, for example, bigrams, trigrams, and combinations between unigram and bigram. So it's like you have two adjacent words together or three adjacent words together, so that you can capture, for example, negations or some more general meanings in the news media data. And we find in all cases, this provide a robust return predictions using different word features. And similarly, for the textual information from various word features, they are also largely overlapped to each other. And when we run this post-race regressions, putting all the unigrams, bigrams, and the trigrams together, there will be strong molecularity among them, and none of them dominates the others. So this result also indicates that the unigram features seems to be good enough to cover relevant textual information in news medias.
So let me interrupt you here. So a question from Hui Chen. We don't necessarily care about the significance of individual coefficients in the multivariate regression. What happens to the out-of-sample prediction errors compared to univariate cases?
For univariate case, you mean control for other predictors?
Well, I'll let Wei answer that.
Sorry, let me clarify here. I was referring to the previous table where you were running this force race between different kind of models for predicting. Exactly here. So I'm curious to see in column 4 or column 8, the out of sample errors when you jointly use all these models to predict returns. Do they reliably outperform out of sample compared to using 1, 2, or 3 alone?
Out of sample, I think we didn't do this test for the out of sample performance. So all the results are based on the in-sample's coefficient significance. Yeah, I think we can check for this out of sample performance. But the correlations across these different fictive values from those different models is pretty high. It's more than 40%. Some of them can be as high as 60%. Right, thanks for the feedback. Okay, so besides these two concerns, they may still be concerned that the predictive power is driven by, say, some mechanical design for such a methodology, right? Because we trained the model using the news media, and we also applied for those news media data. So to validate our models for a purely out-of-sample test, we conduct this design. We call this as a pure out-of-sample test following Jagdish and Wu 2013. So the idea is that instead of training and testing by news media data only, now we separate the training data and the testing data into different resources. In particular, every 6 months, we're going to keep the same process by training the model using news media data. But when looking at test data and out-of-sample prediction, we applied our model to the earnings conference call transcript data, which means that we have another data source, not a text data source to test our model. Because earnings conference calls are also related to firm fundamentals and future uncertainties, if our model really captured some textual information that reflect this option return informations, we should be able to say some similar option return predictabilities by applying our model to other textual information, such as earnings conference call. And we find exactly a significant example option return predictability by applying our model to earnings conference call data. So here we're not running a Fama-McBeth regression. We run a panel regression instead of Fama-McBeth. It's mainly because the samples will become much smaller for each month with the earnings conference call observations. The result is relatively weaker compared with the median data. It's because largely it's because that we are only using the news media to train the model. So it may miss some information from the earnings conference call. In the last section, we aim at shedding some light on the interpretation of the textual predictors based on SVR. So the empirical design of this interpretation, and also mentioned by Dimitris in his previous question, is mainly based on the idea of feature importance. That is, we use the magnitude of the coefficient of each word feature in SVR to define the feature importance. For example, suppose we have a total of 10,000 words as features in SVR, and we first classify each word into positive and negative groups based on the size of their coefficient. So it has a positive effect and a negative effect. And then we select the first 2,000 words with the largest magnitude of the coefficient as an important information set within each group, positive and negative. And because we use a rolling window to train the model, so this top 2,000 important words are also time varying, because every 6 months when you train the model, you will have a different top 2,000 words list. So to find a representative word list over time, we then count how many times a certain word appears in the top 2,000 word list based on the SVR coefficient. And then we select the top 1,000 words, 1,000 most appeared words within each 2,000 word list as important features to be included in the option return prediction dictionary. So we construct a 2,000 words dictionary that can represent the features equity option returns. And lastly, we also look at based on the different topics based on and lastly we also classify each words that's selected based on the Bybee and the Kelly and the Manila shows they have specified some topic dictionaries in their paper. So here is an example to illustrate those important words selected from support vector regression. That's the model thinks are important to forecast equity core or pool option returns. By looking at this selected words only, it is difficult to find any pattern here. But if we classify those words into different topics, we can see some very interesting patterns. For example, this table summarizes the proportion of important words classified into different topics based on Bybee, Kelly, and the Manila and the Shu 2021. So they have specified around 180 topics based on the different words in the list. A first glance of the tables tells us that most of those textual information extracted from news media related to option return predictability is firm specific. For example, we have people familiar, mid-level executives, firm operations, takeover, merger acquisitions, bankruptcy, IPO. And more important is that those topics do reflect and affect the firm's fundamentals uncertainties, therefore being possibly linked to delta hedged option returns. But in addition to those topics, like easily to be identified based on those fundamentals, our option return predictor may also reflect some higher moment, such as skewness, kurtosis, which are quite challenging to specify by any previous topic dictionaries, right? It is quite difficult to see what words represent skewness or variance risk premiums. So actually, we need to extend further our analysis to cover those words in that reflected those option return determinants. Our idea is that, besides those topics that we showed before, our idea here is that first, option returns are driven by those multiple resources, such as the change of implied volatility, skewness, kurtosis, and maybe other mispricing information like idiosyncratic volatility and sentiment. While our previous test linked directly between textual information to option returns. Part of those links may actually come from those intermediaries embedded in textual information as well, such as idiosyncratic volatility and some other jump or inequality. So along this line, similar to what we did for option returns, we can apply the same method to extract the textual information relevant to each of those factors that drive delta hashed option returns and compare those relevant words to the direct option return dictionary. If there are large relevant words overlap between option returns and a certain factor, we can, to some extent, infer that part of the option return predictability by news media is driven by such factor. In other words, we apply the same methodology by projecting each option return determinant onto the word feature, and then select those important word features based on the magnitude of the beta coefficient, like what we did for the option return dictionary. As a result, we construct our representative dictionary for each option return determinant, which is hardly to identify by manually selecting dictionary, such as change of implied volatility, IVO, implied skewness, or kurtosis. So here is just some examples of dictionaries are listed. I have a question here is that, comments. Another way to the same is that it will also useful to show which covariates are most correlated with SVR. Yeah, well, we do think about just directly compare SVR with those covariates, but we think because those covariates, some of their information is not, because you have different information set. So SVR is mainly based on the news media information set. But if for other covariates, it has news media's information and also some other information set. So later on, we actually have a quantitative version that similar to this one is that we first project those option return determined to those word features and similar to here, but we constructed a fitted value for ZIT hat, and we compare the correlations of ZIT between the SVR to identify which one is more close to SVR. Okay, so by identifying a dictionary for each determinant, we can check how many words are overlapped between option return dictionary and each option return determinant dictionary. So a large overlap between these two dictionaries just indicates that the predictive power by textual information may be mainly driven by delta hashed option returns. So when constructing such an overlap score, we consider the correctness of the coefficient signed for each word. For example, if a word is selected to have a positive effect on delta hashed core option return, but it have a negative effect on implied volatility change, which is supposed to positively reflect to the delta hashed core option return, then in this case, we will treat it as a wrong word, and we will deduct it from the overlapped numerators. So in this case, even though it has this overlap, but we will treat it as a wrong signal because it has the wrong signs to forecast the delta hashed option return. Okay, and we will only keep those overlapped words with the correct signs that have the same directions to forecast the equity option returns and the corresponding option return determinants. Okay. And the overlapped score is then defined as the number of the correlated overlapped words between these two dictionaries minus the incorrect overlapped words divided by the total selected words. So a higher overlapped score just means that these two dictionaries, they have a higher proportions and largely reflect the similar information set extracted from the news media. After going through all the determinants, those main determinants of the delta hash option returns, we find the most decisive factor that drive the option return predictabilities by news media is mainly about future changes of implied volatility, followed by idiosyncratic volatility, option implied skewness, and option implied kurtosis. The volatility-related information accounts almost about 40% of the words overlap with option return dictionary, indicating most of the information we captured from news media is about volatility. Despite of this, other return determinants also play crucial roles on option return predictability by news data. It doesn't mean that those volatility information dominate the return predictability. So the other part also contribute to the option return predictability by news media. Overall, we argue that the option return predictability by news media comes from a combined effect by multiple option return determinants, though volatility return information play a central role among them. The previous examination is mainly based on qualitative analysis, right? We look at the overlaps. We also examine the determinants of the textual predictors using quantitative analysis, just like Dimitri suggested. But we do a further adjustment is that based on a similar idea, we, instead of look at the option returns on the left-hand side, we replace using those dependent variables on the left-hand side. And the first step is that we use the SVR to feed the models like what we did for the word overlapping analysis. And then based on the models for each option return determinants, we constructed a fitted value, ZIT hat, based on this new model, so that we will align the information set for each option return determinant to the news medias only, so that it is comparable to our SVR and those option return determinants. So we do not directly compare the correlations between SVR to those covariates, but we first project all of them to the news media information set. And then we run the Fama-McBeth regression to check how those option return determinants can span or explain our textual predictor. So on the left-hand side, it's not option return. It is the textual predictors, let's say co-SVR or put SVR. And consistent with our word overlap analysis, we find that among all the option return determinants, the future change of implied volatility has the highest R-squared, adjusted R-squared, to explain our textual predictors. Although all the other determinants can also significantly explain the textual predictors, no matter it's in a univariate regression or multiple regressions. But definitely the change in the change of the future implied volatility, it accounts for the largest R-squares compared with other return determinants. And same pattern for the delta hashed CUDA option returns. Again, our point is that the predictive power of our textual predictors capture combined information. So even though volatility related information is important, but others also contribute. So as an opposite example, if we train our textual predictors to feed other option determinant separately, let's say instead of looking at option returns, we train the models to forecast the future implied volatility change. And then we use this fitted value, like what we did for previous one, this one, and we use this to forecast delta IV hat to forecast the delta hash the core option returns. We can find a relatively significant result, but it's not strong or as significant as that the option return predictability using the option return as the target. And not even mention that for other parts, if we do the similar analysis, it will lose significant. Okay. So this table just illustrates the idea that if we use textual information to fit each of those components and use it to forecast option returns, except for the future implied volatility change, none of them can survive after controlling for existing option return predictabilities. I just want to illustrate that the importance to analysis our result as a combined effect across different resources. So same for the delta hash, the pool option returns. Okay, so this is our main findings. So let me wrap up my presentation. So the main message we want to convey in this paper is about two perspectives. First is about the usefulness of using text data to study derivatives, in particular about derivative investment, for example, equity option returns. Second is about the usefulness of using machine learning algorithms to extract information from text data. And besides these two takeaways in the papers, we also try to explore how to effectively interpret the machine learning models in the textual analysis. We actually tried some other alternative ways to analyze the text. For example, we also tried using the n-gram structures, word embedding, and sentence embedding. For sentence embedding, we also tried to actually use the attention model that they can select it not at the word level, but at the sentence level. But it seems those method is a little bit messy to organize. Even though you have selected those sentences, some of the sentence actually is quite difficult to explain. Even though statistically, you can find a very strong return prediction, but those models, when you see the outcomes, it's still very difficult to interpret what's going on and how to explain that. So that's why later, finally, we used a simple way, SVR linear model, and also the unigram to explain and to illustrate and analyze the return predictabilities about from the news media. But no matter which method we use to study the interpretations, our conclusion doesn't change, is that the predictive power of textual predictor from the machine learning model is mainly driven by those volatility related information. Okay, so that's what I have for this seminars, and we are looking forward to any feedbacks, questions, and comments about our papers. Thanks.
So thanks very much, Gang. So at this point, we'd like to invite anyone who has a question to unmute him or herself and use your microphone to shout it out. Okay, last opportunity to tell Gang and Jay that they're completely wrong. Oh, Dima has a question.
Well, just like curious, like, of course, this is a very particular option return measure. Have you tried some alternative option return measures? My favorite would be just to form a straddle and then hold it until expiration, because at expiration, we don't need to have option prices. We can just observe option pairs. So I'm wondering whether this machine learning method will also work for those alternative option returns measures.
Well, that's a good suggestion. I think we actually discussed previously that instead of looking at delta hash option return, we can also look at the straddle returns. I vaguely remember, because I think that my PhD student is not here. He tried and using straddle return, and it seems that we can also have a significant result by looking at the straddle returns, because it's mainly about the volatility related information. So not too it's largely we can also observe the return predictions by looking at the straddle returns.
Well, and of course, everyone should look at the option returns relative to option trading costs, right?
Yeah.
I'm just joking, but you already have enough in this paper, but it would be interesting to see like how those returns compare to some bid-ask spreads, and why not?
Currently, we do not have in our presentation, we do have some tests, but the spread will become relatively small. It's still significant, but still become very small after the transaction cost to be considered. Yeah.
Okay, anyone else?
Well, in that case, apparently everybody very well understood what's going on in here. Thank you very much, gang. It's probably because you've been extremely clear. We thank you for your time in the middle of the night. And we look forward to seeing you again amongst us, hopefully in 2 weeks when Wei Chen is teaching machines economics. So please